Welcome to the science fiction novel Lost Epoch Ghost Particle, written by Long Taodong, voiced by 一诺史. Chapter 1 The Ghost Particle. In the late 1930s, people discovered the phenomenon of nuclear fission. It was not long before someone proposed the concept of weaponizing nuclear fission. The various forces, both overt or covert, immediately began their race against timed research effort. Two famous scientists, Hahn and Heisenberg, joined forces to establish the Unarium Club in Germany. The pressure on Callis suddenly increased, and once again, she found herself marginalized. Even with the enlightenment of the feminist movement, female scientists still remained on the margins of major power. Unsurprisingly, she wasn't invited to be the core member of the Unarium Club. Under tremendous pressure, she resolutely refused all the trivial matters of the outside world. With her two capable students, she devoted herself to research in her small laboratory. For that, she almost gave up everything. Over the next 2 or 3 years, she finally reaped some rewards. She discovered that the convenience brought by nuclear fission energy to mankind far exceeds that of oil and coal. However, she later found a new problem. The disadvantages brought by nuclear fission far outweighed the advantages. Because the radioactive products will pose a lethal threat to living things, the destructive power to the environment would also be a hidden danger across the times. Despite her best efforts, Kelly still couldn't overcome the difficulty. Just as some have said, this kind of energy will be a sharp weapon in war and a game changer. Even in the experimental phase, the energy produced by nuclear fission is staggering. Since the beginning of human history, this has been the best chance for humanity to break through energy limit. Callis began by referring to the phenomenon of fission as God blinking his eyes, but she eventually realized that it was not God's blinking eyes, but the cold light of the devil when he bared his sharp fangs. To be another Madame Curie was her life goal. However, she is getting farther and farther away from her life goal, and an invisible rope is blinding her body and mind. She was dragged into the abyss step by step, and she was more worried that the entire human race would be dragged into abyss of doom. She thought a senior like herself was not qualified to be compared with Madame Curie. Madame Curie was in exchange for the discovery of radioactive element radium as a cause of her own life and health. Callis is getting more and more confused about whether this will really bring mankind into abyss. Later, Callis learned from her mentor that Heisenberg's research was not going well, because Heisenberg calculated that the minimum amount of Unarium-235 required for an atomic weapon will be as high as several tons. This is not something that average country can afford, even a powerful Germany. Even extracting 1 kilogram of weapon-grade Unarium-235 will require 200 tons of Unarium ore. Refining a few tons of weapons-grade Unarium-235, the required Unarium ore will exhaust a country's limited national strength. But after Callis kept doing her calculations, she found that, perhaps, the amount of Unarium-235 needed to make an atomic weapon might not be as much as previously thought. The amount of Unarium-235 needed would not exceed 100 kilograms at most. And this goal is not impossible to achieve. She hesitated for a long time. Whether to report this discovery to her superiors. Ultimately, she abandoned the research results of many years and resolutely changed her research direction. She believed that a more moderate approach would bring better results for Germany and all of the mankind. However, Callias also immediately understood one thing. Perhaps the reason she was excluded from the Unarium Club was not only her humanity, but also her style of doing things.
Professor Callias, look, what is this?
Callias was concentrating on the experiment when the sound of her students' astonishment interrupted her. She hated it when people disturbed her while she was doing experiment, and she looked up at them. However, she did not have time to blame those two students who were her pride. She was equally startled and exclaimed, "Wow! Oh my God! How could this be? Has anyone brought a side projector into the lab?" However, she quickly ruled out the influence of the slides. It was as if she was instantly transported to another place, making her almost forget that she had just been experimenting in her own laboratory. The feeling of being here lasted only a moment, and then it was switched to another scene. She was forcibly dragged into a completely different place, as if time and space had been disturbed by someone. However, Callias did not understand the meaning of those scenes. She simply saw the Nazi flags flying in many parts of Europe, and people celebrating their victories. Before she could understand what had happened, everything had disappeared again, leaving only the three of them standing there dumbfounded.
Professor Callias, it's truly exhilarating to see our flag over the European continent.
After calming herself down, Callias said, "Maybe the Führer will lead Germany to complete the wish of unifying Europe one day in the future.
We will never again face the disgusting humiliation after defeat,"
Student Adam said. "Hypocritical contrast and the mutually calculating Anglo-French anti-German alliance.
Let them all go to hell. They always clothe their filthy bodies in the garb of hypocrisy. In the future, there will be no more civil war in Europe. A great feat that even the Emperor Napoleon of France failed to achieve."
Callias said, "What happened just now is very strange. It goes against the existing laws of physics. I'm not sure exactly where the problem is. It seems that our brain and consciousness has an illusion at the same time." Adam suppressed his excitement and said,
"Yes, it is, Professor. But I'm more inclined to believe that it's related to the experiment you did."
Callias repeated the experimental steps again, but the phenomenon that occurred before did not happen. So she gradually increased the workload and kept repeating every step they thought was necessary. Eventually, they narrowed it down to the container holding to the radioactive element Unarium-238, rather than the Unarium-238 element itself inside. She found that whether the Unarium-238 was in the container or not, it did not affect the probability of occurrence. She eliminated as many factors as possible that affected the experiment, including making the container as close to a vacuum as possible. Her physical concepts were being passively changed, which was hard for her to accept. She simplified switched the experimental subject back to an ordinary container, and thus returned to the normal physical laws of the world. Whether there was Unarium-238 or other radioactive elements in the ordinary container, the physical phenomenon it exhibits were as usual, without any anomaly. Callis carefully studied this container that subverts the laws of physics. It was discovered by her friend during a private archaeology in the Middle East. Buried deep in the ruins of ancient building, not only did Callis' friend not realize its value, but even Callis herself only learned of its preciousness after using radiocarbon chronology. This container, which looks like a glass jar, was made at least 20,000 years. It is a truly man-made structure, not processed from naturally occurring crust ore. And she was astonished to find that the container seemed to be tailor-made for nuclear experimental. Not only could it completely isolate the radiation produced by the decay of radioactive elements, but it also offered a good observation field of view. It took Callis a lot of effort to match it with the linear particle accelerator in the laboratory. Callis said to the students, "Adam, Julie, please help me to reconfirm that everything is normal. Maybe we didn't do well enough in some step. Next, we need to be more cautious." After another bout of business, they failed again. Callis was left pondering deeply over what had gone awry. Adam said, "This has reached the most ideal state we have ever had. Regarding the reasons why our current experiment has not been successful, I think there are two possibilities. One possibility is that there is no special microscopic particles in the container at all, and the phenomenon that just occurred is due to some supernatural phenomenon from outside. The other is that there are indeed particles that we have never discovered before, but their decay period is extremely short, so short that it only gives us one chance to discover them. Perhaps the occurrence of space-time distortion has nothing to do with our experimental steps at all, and everything is just a coincidence." Julie said, "I think there should be another explanation. Maybe our equipment is not advanced and powerful enough. After all, our particle accelerator is too insignificant compared to the huge particle accelerator like the universe." Callis pondered for a while, and finally she cautiously increased some power of particle accelerators. The charged particles generated inside the particle accelerator bombard the space within the container at high speed. This time, they finally witnessed once again the shock brought by the sudden appearance of time-space distortion. Adam cheered excitedly again, and Julie noticed abnormality from Callis' expression. They found a rule. The greater the power of the energy output of the particle accelerator, the longer the interval time, and the more prone the space-time distortion phenomenon. When the surroundings were once again the same as before, Callis was still frowning. She said slowly, "Maybe the particle family is larger than we thought. I don't know if this is a good news. Anyway, I can't feel that. You may wonder why I use so many uncertain expressions today. After all, science is quite rigorous. But today, I can't be rigorous anyway. Our seemingly sensational achievements in the scientific community are all due to this ancient container from tens of thousands of years ago. This is a technological achievement of that ancient civilization tens of thousands of years ago, not a miracle we created." Callis paused for a moment, then raised her voice and said, "I'm sure there must be a new nature element of nature. It must have accidentally entered and been captured. just as this container can isolate radiation. This natural element cannot escape it. However, such a space-time distortion event is impossible in reality, which violates the fundamental understanding of space-time in modern science. Julie said, "It's like a ghost. It can see us, but we can't see it. It seems to exist in a unique quantum state, rendering current scientific laws in its presence." Callis was silent for a long time. She was thinking unknown particle. Ghost particle. This name really suited. There is such a tacit understanding between this ancient glass container and the ghost particle. This led Callis to question more things, including Darwin's theory of evolution. Otherwise, primitive humans would never had such abilities. Perhaps, in the 4.6 billion year cycle of the Earth, the idea of human particularity is itself absurd. The idea of racial superiority has been supporting the fragile vanity of modern people. Callis finally stopped that there was a naughty ghost playing hide-and-seek with her inside. Revealing the true nature of unknown matter is her mission as a physicist. Her eyes were no longer confused, but sharpened. Her eyes were fixed on there, as if the naughty ghost hiding inside had no place to hide. She said to the two students with absolute certainty, "It is still in the glass container, and the reason we can't see it is because our detection methods are not advanced enough. Just like before the discovery of radioactive elements, we didn't know that heavy elements could decay into lighter ones. That is a process of energy release, and is a part of the material cycle of the entire world. Our eyes can confuse our brain, and our brain can also deceive our eyes. This invisible material element, let's call it a ghost particle for the time being, it fooled our eyes, our brains, and our limited monitoring methods. What we urgently need now is to find a detection capability beyond visible light, microwave, and various wavelengths. Guys, what we urgently need now is funds and manpower, especially a more advanced circular particle accelerator and higher monitoring methods. For the high power consumption of particle accelerators is beyond our capacity to afford. It seems that we have to seek help from the government." Julie said, "Professor, don't worry too much. I think there should be more than one of them, but we just lack the ability to discover and utilize it. Ghost particles have the ability to help us see into the future, and once we possess this ability, it will break the old order. That's a kind of ability to transcend time and space, and giving us a kind of completely asymmetric first-mover advantage with our opponent." Adam was filled with a wonderful aspiration for the future, which allows him to foresee the endless opportunities in the future. His thinking became exceptionally sharp, but his language center was noticeably sluggish. His mouth stuttered uncontrollably. So, Professor Callis, we'll all win the Nobel Prize in Physics. And that's just thinking about it so exciting," Julie said. "In the war, yes. Does the Nobel Prize in Physics still hold any significance? None of this matter. What's important is that the war will soon be over. Having the ability to predict future events is equivalent to having one or more dimensions across time than other people. We can foresee the course of future events, and the curtain of time will leave a gap for us, while others will still be lose their way in the dark. Atomic weapons or any other black technologies will all be a not so secret to us. We are going to get a lot more government funding than the Unarium Club. Kelly said, Guys, I will figure out a way to raise funds now. By the way, today is the weekend, so after a while, clean up a bit and go home early. Have a nice weekend. As she spoke, she checked the Asian glass container she had just sealed once again and placed it in where she thought was the safest. Before leaving, she did not forget to give one last reminder. Adam, Julie, you must keep it a secret. Kelly did not call anyone and she left her small laboratory alone. First, she walked through the bustling and clean urban area. The bustle of the crowd made her suddenly remember a very ordinary scene that she also a part of the city. The desolate scene after the World War I has long been a thing of the past, and people were strutting around the thriving city doing all kinds of things they enjoy. Almost all people were entranced in the yearning for the future. The whole society was like an 18 or 19-year-old passionate youth, exuding an unruly spirit of vigor and self-confidence. She drove to the suburbs of Berlin and passed a large residential area on the edge of the city. An archaic stone arch bridge with reached historical into her eyes. Beyond the bridge, there was no bustling scene, replaced by an endless stretch of fields. It is as if it were a painted craft by the nature, with colorful patches spread out in an orderly on the ground. The thick woods in the distance blocked Kelly from looking further away. The branches and leaves of the trees on the both sides stretched out densely above the road. Setting up a pergola, the light struggled to the dense branches and leaves, and it gradually became no longer hot. They passed through the front windshield of the car and gently fell upon Kelly. Kelly couldn't help but envy the low-key lifestyle of her mentor. Her mentor could have become a giant in the scientific community. But now, he close to nature. She had no time to be overly entranced by the captivating scenery and had to step on the gas again. On both sides of the empty town streets, a few houses were sparsely distributed. A girl was waving to Kelly. Kelly! Kelly! Kelly waving her arms at the girl with equal enthusiasm. She stopped the car and said with a smile, Hannah, are you going out? Hannah said, I was so bored at home, and I was just thinking of going out when you came. Okay, Hannah, be careful. The road is very slippery. Kelly hurriedly got out of the car and rushed to support Hannah, who was running over. Hannah happily linked her arms with Kelly's arm and walking through the car near the gate. She asked, Can you finally have a day off today? Kelly spread her hands helplessly and said, Oh, I'd like to. But Hannah, you know that weekends have become a luxury for me. Hannah, is the professor at home? Hannah said, I knew you wouldn't be so free. Now I have no one to play with. Kelly, why do you make yourself so hard? Isn't it better to enjoy life? I really can't understand your behavior. Just like my father. Look, he's still busy at such an old age. After Hannah finished speaking, she opened her little mouth and said no more. Kelly said,
After a few years, when I get older, I also want to have a comfortable old age life. Then I will have enough time to be with you. It's just that by then, maybe beautiful Hannah will have found someone who wouldn't need my company anymore. Hannah smiled and said, Callus, you are teasing me again. Okay, I wouldn't trouble you. My dad should be in the study at the moment. You can go straight there. I know you have important matters to discuss. I wouldn't disturb you. Callus pulled Hannah along as she walked and said, Let's go together. I'd like to hear your opinion. Hannah asked, Really? Callus smiled and nodded. After the two of them reached to head study, Callus briefly stated her purpose, just as she was about to elaborate on what had happened. But Professor Head waved her off. Head said, Please wait a moment. Then Head turned to Hannah and said, Hannah, we have something important to discuss. You go out first and don't let anyone disturb us. But... Hannah looked at her father's serious expression and said no more. Just, oh, with a sound. Then unwillingly backed out. The sound of Hannah closing the door was so quiet that Callus didn't realize the door was really closed until she looked back. Professor Head still looked as calm as ever, but Callus' words made Head's expression changing. Head's beautiful beard began to tremble up and down as he spoke, and he suddenly started talking a lot. Head analyzed. In Einstein's theory of relativity, it is such a phenomenon was expounded. If an object approaches or exceeds the speed of light, then its time will be relatively slow. But your discovery involves a phenomenon that the theory of relativity cannot explain, which is subversive in physics. If this phenomenon is confirmed, not only will the theory of relativity have to be revised, but also the nerves of the whole world will be touched by it. The Führer will surely pay attention to it, because it will change the course of the war and even the rules of the game for the entire world. But only when he personally experienced the ultimate shock brought by that phenomenon of space-time distortion can he truly value your new discovery. Take me to your laboratory right now.